As far as insights for content creators, the thing that other people just immediately discount as being too risky for whatever perceived reasons, if that risk is only a small fraction in reality of what the perceived risk is, especially the perceived risk by conventional wisdom, that's an opportunity to lean in and do something that no other people are doing, or not very many other people are doing, and create a unique value proposition. The first thing first is always the content.
Yeah.
Like if you have the highest quality production of turd content, you still have turd content. If you have low production quality on exceptionally great ideas and stuff that people find valuable, then you actually have content.
Yeah.
And you can increase the production quality on that over time to get even more reach and value out of what it is that you're doing.
Before we dive into the conversation with Hans Nelson, let's start with a quick disclaimer. This video provides general financial education and is not personalized investment, legal, tax, or other advice. Any references to specific securities, products, or strategies do not constitute a recommendation or an endorsement. Please consult a qualified professional for advice tailored to your situation. All right, back to the conversation. The day that we're recording this is the day after Father's Day. And so happy Father's Day to you, Hans, and to all of the other dads out there. You're an engineer, you're a content creator, you're a husband, you're an investor, you are a deeply passionate individual, and you are a foster dad. Tell me what it's like juggling all of that.
Well, there's definitely a lot going on. Obviously, the big, one of the big parts of all of it that helps be able to juggle the things is the fact that Brittany is awesome. And so we work together fairly well as a team, and that creates space to be able to do, a whole range of different things. So that's definitely, the biggest part of all this that I think a lot of people tend to overlook is how the right relationship can actually be a huge springboard for you to create space to actually pursue the things that you're passionate about. Because, one of the things about content creation, at least as it stands today, is that the way that you are going to provide value to the world primarily just by being an obsessed person who cannot help themselves and just follow that obsession where it leads you, and then share your learning along the way with other people who are interested in the thing that you're interested in, but they're not nearly as obsessed as you are. And they have other competing priorities. And so you're helping them to learn about whatever that thing is in a way that doesn't cost them all the time that it took you to develop the knowledge about your obsession. And so you're offering them an arbitrage in time, the shortcut to get to be close to the place that you are on, that topic without having to put in that work. And that means that you have to not do a lot of other things. And so if you can have someone who helps to create space for you to where you don't have to do as many of those other things that keep you from being able to follow that obsession, then that's a huge win and a huge unlock. And, it's really easy in today's day and age and social media environment for us to get caught in these battle of the sexes themes, how men are the worst or women are the worst. And the reality of the situation is that, man, we need each other. And if you can find someone who actually believes that they need you and you believe that you need them, and you can have a place that you're trying to get to together that is the same place, then it's awesome. And obviously that also involves kids. And so being a good parent is definitely part of, I think, the fabric of what it means to be humans. We wouldn't be here as a species if parenting wasn't hard coded into our DNA. So, I think for not everyone, but for many people that run away from that responsibility, that they miss out on a profound part of the human experience. that evolution has also made, like, created mechanisms to make that process extremely rewarding. So it's easy to, get focused on the things that you lose in parenting, but until you've experienced it, it's hard to understand exactly how much you gain from that experience. And I mean, that was something that I knew that I wanted. And when we weren't able to have kids normally, we decided that that was something that we wanted to give to children who needed good parents, who, didn't have a home life situation that was stable, and they were, taken into the care of the state for whatever reason. And during that time that they were under the care of the state, needed a good, loving family. And so that's been incredibly challenging, and rewarding at the same time. Um, and I think that that is also something that, helps to just stabilize life, for, at least for me, at least for Brittany and I. So, um, trying to juggle that and content, is always a negotiating act. Both, like, I have to negotiate my time with myself. I have to negotiate my time with the kids, and have to work with Brittany to try and figure out who does what when, so that all the things can get done. But when you are with someone who's aligned on the foundations of what your family is and where it's going, then that makes that stuff usually pretty workable. Obviously, there are times when it does get a little bit more challenging, and you have to lean in and figure some stuff out, and have, a combination of some humility and understanding and compassion for everyone involved in order to make all the things work. But it is fun. And then on the content side, I think having this outlet to pursue that obsession, that I'm a primarily Tesla related content creator. I've been obsessed with technology in general for many years, and then Elon seems to be, one of the most pivotal people in that space that actually makes crazy things into reality. There's a bunch of others, and I go down the rabbit hole on lots of other personalities besides Elon Musk as well, and lots of other companies. But he's the primary mover and shaker in the space, and so I've been, spending, many hours each week, every week now, probably for, at least back to 2018 sometime, trying to learn everything I can about Tesla, the company, SpaceX, um, and all the things that are attached to that. And that has been an outlet that helps me to deal with the ups and downs of, some of the things that are difficult on the home front with foster care. And so I think, those things go together well. And, since I'm not going to a job that it feels soul sucking and I hate, yes, it's hard to figure out how to do content and be consistent and all those things at the same time that I'm being a foster parent, and dealing with, like, it can be challenging from both the emotional aspect, but also from the schedule aspect, that, kids have to be here, there, and everywhere to an even greater degree in foster care, because you've got visitation and all these mandatory visits with this professional and that professional and blah, 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 blah. And so it's almost like, regardless of what age they are, your children are involved in activities, and you have the scheduling challenges of kids that are involved in activities without even having the activity. So then if they want to do the activities too, it's even next level. And so anyways, you trying to juggle all of that with content. I do feel like, though it's challenging, it still is something that's worth it, because it's a source of, it's a good both escape and fuel for my life to get to do those things. Um, and yeah, that's I think another thing that people, if you're always looking at the downside of, what is it going to cost me to do this thing, and you're not looking about, yeah, but what are all the benefits? Like if you're cost benefit analysis or your pro versus con list, if you only think about all the cons and you don't think about what the upside is, that it's pretty easy to not do the thing that actually could be the most transformative and best thing for you. And this is a dynamic that also plays out in investments. And so, that's, I'm very interested in technology, but the other part of the content that I create is just like I'm researching companies that I would like to potentially be invested in. And one of the really, really important things in investing is trying to understand how, if this goes right, how good could it get? How far could it go? And all the big successes, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, at the time that they were laying the foundation of the companies that they were going to become, people way underestimated how big these companies could grow, how much their companies could be worth, the level of impact that these companies could have on the world. And that's that's one of the classic blunders, as people would say. So I think for people that are thinking about content, you already have a set point and models out there for how big this could get, and the ceiling is absolutely enormous. And so you don't even have the excuse of not knowing how big content can be and where that could go for you if you're willing to follow your obsession and work and do all the things. Um, and that was one of the reasons why I did decide to go all in on content creation here over the last 4 years, was because I wanted a combination of freedom and leverage, and having the ability to have infinite copies of myself living out there on the internet, talking to people,
Yeah.
and figuring out, if that is the case, how do I generate some revenue on the backside of hopefully creating some value for some people? Um, yeah, I mean, if you could clone yourself and do a lot of the boring work that you have to do every day, would you do that?
Totally.
The answer is obviously yes. And, creating content is essentially that, in an infinitely scalable way. And that is kind of the core insight and power of content. And so then it's, a matter of, okay, who can you speak to and provide value to, and what size audience can that be, and how much value can you provide to those people? And so there's, different strategies. You can try and have a very small audience, but you can provide so much value to an audience that the work that they do is so important that it is a highly paid uh, field. And then if you're helping even make small improvements to people's businesses, but those improvements, because of the field that they're in, are worth hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars or potentially even more, then it doesn't take, very many people that you can serve in that way for your time then to actually legitimately be worth many hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars in a year, because you're able to provide, that economic value to people that are making those decisions. And then the flip side is, or you could have an audience of, you know, billions of people that you are providing a little bit of joy to every day. And like, it doesn't have to be anything more than that, but at the scale of billions of dollars, that can also be the type of thing that can help you to earn hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars a year as well. And that is the power of technology, is that ability to scale impact. And that's the reason that I spend so much time talking about technology, thinking about companies that are built on these types of scalable network effects. And um, it's just a lot of fun.
Like a full-time job just in the analysis component, let alone then
Yep.
also trying to create content. I think that's
Communicate.
yeah, and be able to, I guess, create a perspective that's unique or different or is additive to the rest of the conversation that's occurring. I think that a lot of people kind of lose sight of that when they look at content creators in different niches. I mean, there are many that obviously are essentially recreating the same type of content, just said in a different way. And then you have some that just look at, whatever their niche or field is, they look at it from a completely different perspective than other people. You being an engineer by education and by trade for a bit gives you a unique perspective into some of the challenges of the companies that you are researching, or maybe some of the moats and the things that they're doing exceptionally well and why they're different from other manufacturers or other companies. And then you have different people who are providing content on the same types of companies, but they come from a different perspective. They come from different lines of work. And I think that's just like forgotten about when we talk about content. I think a lot of people are afraid because they feel like a niche is already saturated, when in reality it probably is to some degree, but there's always value in adding a different perspective. Now, if you're just regurgitating what's already been stated by other people, then yeah, there's probably not a ton of value from that. But it's trying to figure out what do I know and what experiences do I have that are added to this conversation. And I think that's been a unique and interesting thing to watch with your journey and content over the last few years.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think, if you're struggling to come up with content that feels like it is differentiated in some way from other things, those are, your background, what your specific area of expertise is one thing that can provide that differentiation. But then also, point of view, I would say that maybe something that has helped me become a, you know, relatively prominent member of the Tesla retail investor community is not just my engineering background and some of my technical understanding of some of the topics, but I think it's also the fact that that space was largely dominated by, people who were uh, living on the coast, either in California or on the East Coast. And so you had the more left leaning perspective on the company, especially since Tesla was a company that was, uh, you know, very prominent in the environmental movement. And I come from a more middle America perspective. I'm much more libertarian leaning than either Republican or Democrat. And that, uh, I think, was something that just wasn't as common in the community of people who talked about Tesla. And because it wasn't as common, so it's like the combination of that plus my technical background, I had a couple of different um, holes in the tent of being differentiated, and I think those types of things helped. And that's one of the learnings that I can't remember if I picked this up from Jack Butcher or from Naval Ravikant or from Naval Ravikant via Jack Butcher. But you know, adding those, there's probably several different ways that you as a person or a content creator could be different than other people in your niche. And the more that you can add those different things to make yourself even more different, like if you're a little bit different on axis one and a little bit different on axis two, and you combine those, then and no one else has combined those two ways to be different together, then you become a one of one.
Yep.
And you're able to then, if that thing also happens to provide value to the audience or the marketplace that you're speaking into, then that's can be a real source of power for you to, yeah, really grow your audience, to say something valuable from a perspective that is shared by other people but not commonly spoken to. And so you got to keep that arbitrage in mind, that it needs to be something that there are quite a few people that are hungry for it or share it, but there's not a whole lot of representation in the conversation that comes from that perspective.
Totally. What do you kind of on that note of like trying to figure out what your voice was in those two tent poles? What do you feel like is different today in creating content than what you expected? And maybe what are some things that are as you expected? Because when you first started creating content, I guess it's my understanding that you weren't you weren't as clear on those two tent poles. And that's something that maybe can only be formed in hindsight by just repetition and starting to understand and see these things long term. And so like how did you develop that understanding, and what is different and similar, I guess, to what you expected going into actually creating content?
Well, so I don't know what the what I thought it would be versus what it is. Maybe what I should do is I should back up. So I, kind of described the process that I decided, hey, I want to be all in on content because it is this scalable, high leverage thing. But what I didn't say is that point at which I made that decision, I was already making content. Um, and so the decision was, hey, do I really double down with this and not do other things and put my energy and focus into only doing content and not doing other things that I could do to make money? The way that I got into making content in the first place was kind of an interesting and roundabout way that I don't know if this is a strategy that someone can use on purpose or not, but
It's
I'll just
very
share my
unique.
story and yeah,
Yeah.
people can take from it what they will. So I will say the thing that I was doing was I was pursuing my passion, and I was a huge nerd about Tesla. And anytime I would have conversations with other people that I knew in real life who loved Tesla, I realized like, wow, I actually know more about the company than, whoever the most knowledgeable people in my circle are. And so I need to like look for people who know more than them. And to do that, you obviously go online. And so I had joined a number of different content creators, Patreons that I had learned from over the years. And uh, some of them I would engage in the, Discord chats or whatever more than others. And one of those people was Farzad Misbahi. And I started supporting him on Patreon probably within the first 12 months that definitely within the first 12 months that he was making content. It was probably somewhere around month 6. And he has his own very unique story of getting into content creation, but he pretty much blew up right away because of the unique perspective that he came from. And it's very not normal for someone to put out their first YouTube video and immediately get, tens of thousands of views and have their channel off to the races. That was his experience. Lucky him. And, but it's not really luck is part of the deal. He had very valuable things to say about the company because he had worked at Tesla for 4 years. He also was very intelligent. So the combination of his background, his analytics, his ability to articulate why Tesla was different, and the fact that we didn't have Tesla employees coming out of the company who were trying to then communicate to the rest of the world what it is that's so special and different about working at Tesla. And so that was, a real unique perspective that he had that the community was very hungry for because no one else had represented it. And he had to kind of go against the grain because there's a lot of things that you're not supposed to share when you leave Tesla because you're under NDA for several years. And so he most people would look at that and they just don't want to share anything because they are afraid to cross the line.
Yep.
And so it's just better not to say anything. And he was like, no, I'm going to actually share everything that I can share. I'm going to, be careful not to violate the NDA part, but I'm going to share a lot. And so that's one of the reasons why there was such a void of people in that space who were representing former employees to the world. So yeah, all of that kind of worked together to just blow him up instantly. And so I started listening to this guy. He's like, man, he actually knows what he's talking about. It's great to get this insight. I started supporting him on Patreon, and then within a few months from there and interacting in the Discord chat, he started doing this crazy thing. And this is going to be, I think, one of the things that's hard for other people who might want to do this to replicate. I've never seen anyone who has opened up their live stream to community members to come on. So he said, as long as you're willing to come on video, so you got to have a camera and a microphone, and you're in my community and not doing some sort of crazy vetting in the background, you can come on the live streams and you can participate in a roundtable discussion about the topics of the week for Tesla. So he would host these roundtable discussions every week on Fridays, and he called them the community forum. And like I said, maybe there are other content creators who have done this, but it was the first time I had ever seen it. And so I decided, well, hey, I like talking about Tesla, and it's hard to find other people that can have these types of discussions and really like try and understand things at the frontier of what my understanding is. And so I really enjoyed doing that. And um, that turned into, over the course of several months, I was like, I started it once. Once I did it once, I was hooked. I came back every week. And so I was doing these roundtable discussions every week on Fridays for many months. And
Let's pause on that for a second, because like if you think about the risk that a content creator poses by just opening up their content to people in their community to come on with a video and mic and say essentially whatever they want, it seems kind of astronomical. It seems like a huge risk. However, the more that I think about it, the more that I feel like that risk is dramatically lowered, because the bar of person that is willing to come on video and be able to coherently bring something to the table and contribute to the conversation is probably quite high. And so I feel like there's kind of this natural weeding function.
well, yes, there is. And I mean, Farzad has been explicit about this. There's two levels of filters. First, you're filtering out any of the people who are not willing to pay to support the content.
That's right.
And so they're like, that's one.
Patreon.
Yes. And so like they had to be a paid supporter of Farzad on some platform somewhere. So there was, I think, Patreon and maybe YouTube members, and now there's X. So yeah, there were multiple different ways that people could support him. But you had to pass the filter of, I'm willing to pay to support this content, which in and of itself filters out a lot of the types of people that you would be worried about giving the chance to say whatever they want to say.
Yeah. Were these live?
Yeah, they were live.
Wow.
So like the risk was all in. Like,
I like it. It's
but it also sent a signal. I think as community members, we kind of all understood that there is trust that's being given to you as someone who's coming on this panel, not to fuck this up.
Yeah.
And, I think people for the most part treated that trust with respect and handled it well. And that was, like you said, it is risky, but it's not as risky as you would think it is at first. And so this is another, as far as insights for content creators, the thing that other people just immediately discount as being too risky for whatever perceived reasons, if that risk is only a small fraction in reality of what the perceived risk is, especially the perceived risk by conventional wisdom, that's an opportunity to lean in and do something that no other people are doing, or not very many other people are doing, and create a unique value proposition that you can then exploit to grow. So that was the place that I kind of got started, and I got hooked, and I decided, hey, you know what? When I come to these panel discussions, I'm coming prepared. I have topics from the week that I thought were really interesting, and I want to share why I thought they were interesting and all the stuff that I've learned about them. And I think, differentiated myself from other people who, they were there, they enjoyed the discussions, but they weren't thinking about these panel discussions as potentially practice for, doing this for real. And I knew that I enjoyed it, and it was a fuel for me, and a passion and an obsession. Like, all those things were mixed up there, and I was like, okay, this is a shot. I can practice all the things that go into making content without having to figure out a bunch of it too. Like, there's an audience here, so I don't have to figure out how to reach my first audience. I'm not doing any of the production work. I'm not doing titles. I'm not doing thumbnails. I'm not like, there's so many parts of being a content creator that I just didn't have to deal with. All I had to do was come prepared and say interesting things. And I was like, okay, like I can do that. And, I needed to have a camera and a microphone. So I started out with literally just using my MacBook M1, like I still have it. It's old. It's like the first M1 MacBook Air. And so I was using the webcam from that. I had a stack of books. It was like this tall. So I put the computer on this giant stack of books so that it was like face level with me right here in, I guess this wasn't the first place that I was. This is literally my closet in our master bedroom that I have turned into this little studio. And it was, oriented differently at the time. But yeah, I would just put my MacBook M1 Air there and I had a $20 headset from a Chinese company called Empow, which is the same headset that, Chamath and the All In podcast guys used to use kind of when they first started it. That, like, it's literally just a headset with a microphone. The microphone's okay. It's not great, but it's not terrible. It's better than AirPod microphones. So it was like, that was the lowest friction way that I could just get into it. Like, I just want to get started. And the camera I already had and the cheapest headset that I could afford that didn't sound absolute trash was all that I needed to then get to come into this setting to have these conversations and see, is the core of my value proposition is the ideas that I bring and the way that I articulate those ideas, and let me work on that. So I worked on that for, all of those months. And then the other thing that I did along that is I would just, every month I would put a little bit of money aside to upgrade my studio and try and get better microphone, eventually better camera, and then like work on one piece at a time, getting my production value to a decent place. And my goal in all of that was always the lowest friction as possible.
Like a minimalist approach
And
to setup.
yeah, I mean, I still don't, have, this is obviously a decent mic. It's the Shure MV7, but I'm not using an XLR cable with this, even though it's capable of it. And it would probably increase the quality of my sound by just a couple of percent. But I don't want to deal with, all of the complicated audio interfaces that go along with XLR cables. I'm just using, and the reason I bought this mic specifically is because it's like the Shure SM7B that everyone likes, and it sounds so great, and it gets me to like 80 or 90% of the audio quality of that Shure SM7B, but it's got a USB cable and I just plug it into my computer and I literally don't worry about any of that crap.
Yeah.
And it's like, you don't have to get caught up in these complexity traps that so many people get caught up in, of like, oh, I can't start making content until, I have $2,000. Sorry.
Okay.
I don't have to get caught up into that trap of I cannot create content until I've got a studio that's got thousands of dollars worth of professional grade equipment in order to just say the thing to the recording device that I can then send out into the ether so that people can hear it.
It's so,
and yeah,
it's so profound. Like, so I'm running an XLR setup, and literally this week I was thinking, how can I simplify? How can I get rid of cables? And it's a setup that I've had for years, and it works okay. Honestly, the sound quality is not as good as I would expect from the gear that I have. I'm still using a webcam that I've had for probably 10 years. But I think a lot of people have this expectation. They see these channels that are just beautifully produced, that are being filmed in literal studios in many cases. And they expect that that is the starting point, that that is the threshold in order to be able to start creating. And while I do believe that the threshold has increased over the last 5 years, it's still, you don't have to have a crazy high production value in order, as long as the content itself is of quality. And I mean, content creators have heard this ad nauseum, but audio is the most important. People don't generally care about the video. They do care about audio. And so I love that you started with $20, a stack of books, and a computer. And you've slowly grown to where your production quality is excellent. You're not in a studio, you're still in a closet. And I think that that's just like, I think so many people just get caught in the weeds. And I've seen so many people invest into their channels thinking that the quality of their production is going to increase their chances of getting revenue or growing their channel. And that's just not the case at all. Many of the creators that I've worked with that are doing exceptionally well have pretty rudimentary setups. That's not always the case, but it's still the case in many situations. And so, yeah, I guess my advice would be to not let production quality or fear of not having the quality that you want to impede creating the content.
Well, yeah, and the harsh reality for the vast majority of content creators, and this was, when I launched my own channel, this was also, the case for me, even though I had exposure and people who knew my name and, kind of a start of a small audience, that most of those first videos that you make, no one's going to see them. And, the people that make these highly produced videos. Like MKBHD is famously one of the highest production tech YouTuber people on the planet. Not one, like he is pretty much uncontestedly the highest production quality tech YouTuber. And yet, go back and watch his first YouTube videos. They were awful.
Look at Mr.
No
Beast.
one watched them.
He literally had
Mr.
a
Beast is the
24-hour
same.
video
Yes.
of him watching paint dry.
Yeah. So like that's not, where they end up is not where they started.
Yeah.
And if you want to be where they are, you have to figure out some sort of continuous iterative process where you get a little bit better for a long time. And eventually you end up in these crazy places where you do have, great production value, but they got there not because the production value was the thing that made them.
Yeah.
That's obviously not the case. The thing that made their channels was that they made content that was interesting to people and people found value from.
Yeah.
So you have to remember, you've got to keep first things first. In content, the first thing first is always the content.
Yeah.
Like if you have the highest quality production of turd content, you still have turd content. If you have low production quality on exceptionally great ideas and stuff that people find valuable, then you actually have content.
Yeah.
And you can increase the production quality on that over time to get even more reach and value out of what it is that you're doing. But you have to actually have valuable content that you're making before that, and trying to focus on, production value over that to begin with is a dead end that, will eat you alive. And one of the things that is especially, like, it's not just that you won't get traction, is it will be even more discouraging to you when you go spend thousands of dollars on your production quality and then you make your first video and you get 0 views. That feels 100 times crappier.
It feels way worse
than I just threw something together with what I had at the time and I just got something out there and it didn't do very well. Oh, well, you know what? There's 100 things that I know that I can improve so that maybe I'll get more views next time. And I'm going to pick one of those things.
Yeah.
And I'm going to do that for the next video and I'm going to make one.
Yeah. I think
that
investing
is,
in your channel
that
important.
psychological value, is very, very underappreciated.
Completely agree. And I think that it's important to invest in the channel. Like, you made investments into increasing
Definitely.
the production quality. However, I do think that I was having another conversation about this a couple of weeks ago, but I feel like the pendulum is swinging within content. We started off with extremely rudimentary, low production quality content. People were just producing what they liked. And there obviously the accessibility of many of these pieces of equipment and tools and things like that did not exist 10 years ago. But it's like it started out as being very rudimentary, and then the pendulum swung to extremely high production content. And then I feel like it's almost swinging back a bit, where the bar for the type of content that people want to consume is many times some of the lower quality content. I'm not saying like recording on a flip phone or something like that, but I do think that there's something in a extremely polished world that we live in online today. I feel like any semblance that people have that something is authentic and real and genuine and just like off the cuff, I think it's more appreciated today than it was a few years ago. And so I think now is a great time to be starting small and not overcompensating with production quality, because I think that as more and more things become AI generated and the line between reality and generated is increasingly blurring, any semblance of authenticity or, imperfection, I think is appreciated. I don't know, just my thoughts on that.
Yeah. I think that's always, the flaws and imperfections are always part of the beauty that captures humans, like in all sorts of domains, whether that's romantic interests in other people, or art or machinery. Like that's, part and parcel with the human experience. I think I might say I'm somewhat skeptical of the idea of a pendulum here. I think it's more likely that the actual mechanism at play is much more like a barbell, that there's always room for more highly produced, more um, longer form, more in-depth, intricate story. Like there's the Game of Thronesification of content. Like let's tell a epic, multi-season story about something. It's incredibly high effort, high investment, all those things. Um, and then the other side is the TikTokification of everything. Like we're going to do the literal opposite of that. And these are two magnetic extremes where there's a lot of success to be found. And I think there's this wasteland of stuff in the middle of that that isn't very compelling anymore in
How do you avoid the
the
wasteland?
world of media. Yeah, and so like that's you need to decide like there's success in the low, like the high authenticity, and you don't have to think about this in terms of length either, because that would be maybe a false dichotomy, because you could think about that just being like the longest stuff out there is where I could succeed, or TikToks are where I could succeed. And there's a wasteland in the middle of times. Like you can't make any content that's 15 minutes or 20 minutes or 35 minutes or 50 minutes. That's not what I'm saying here. What I'm saying is that there's like an authenticity vector that you can maximize for, or there's a production vector that you can maximize for. And you don't like, you should decide which ones of those things really works for your personality and the content that you want to make, the message that you want to get out into the world. Um, and then once you make that decision, then don't do weird stuff that's in the middle. That's just like, I'm going to be like kind of produced, but kind of authentic, and like, blah. People are just not going to be that interested in this funky. They want to know where you're at. Like, you're hot or you're cold. I want piping hot coffee or I want a frappuccino. I don't want lukewarm crap.
Fair. Where do you feel like
So,
where's your content within that barbell then?
so mine is, I guess I prepare heavily without preparing. So like I don't do scripted content. I I spend a lot of time reading and researching and watching and listening, and then I just get on and I get on pod. This is one of the reasons that I do podcasts specifically, is because the podcast format is that I talk to someone else, they talk to me, we have a conversation back and forth, and the conversation goes wherever it goes on the foundation of all of this knowledge that I have built up over time. And I can explore an idea in real time that maybe I don't understand with a guest, or I can share some deep and profound insights that I've discovered along the way. And I don't know necessarily which one of those two things it's going to end up being, or maybe I will just literally listen the entire time. Um, and so, yeah, like the podcast format, and I think this is one of the reasons why the podcast format is so compelling to so many people, is it is that authenticity end of the barbell that we talked about, where people can tell when someone is having a conversation that has like this strict agenda behind it, and it doesn't feel. And I think that's one of the reasons why those podcasts specifically suck so bad, is because people, when they're listening to conversation, like the podcast medium is supposed to be the interesting, authentic, not super highly produced medium, and that just comes off as corporate and fake and lame, and people just don't want to listen to that kind of stuff. And especially if you're the new person trying to make that stuff today, like the only place that works is for people that is what they do, which is going to be your CNNs, or like it's got to be some big corporate effort that people for whatever reason find value in to succeed at doing that thing that's very not podcasty. So if you want to do a podcast that sounds corporate, but you don't have all the other benefits that come along with having that presence and distribution and reputation, you are totally going to get crushed. So like if you're a new person trying to get into content and you want to get into podcasts, don't do that. You're going to fail. Like that
Unless
is
they're
guaranteed
story
recipe
driven.
for disaster.
I mean, you could look at Gimlet Media, and they produce some very high production value shows.
Yes. Yeah. So
And so
those are
they're
not podcasts. Those they
would they
they
be
are
considered?
distributed.
Okay, yeah, let's talk about the
They're
difference between.
stories.
Oh, yes. So that's what I want to get into. Let's talk about like the difference between distribution here and the type of media that's being produced.
Yes. Yes. So, man, there's so much on this. The medium is the message. So this is a term that is coined by a guy named Marshall McLuhan back in the early-ish parts of the 1900s. And there's a book by a guy named Neil Postman called "Amusing Ourselves to Death" that also kind of builds on these ideas. But um, yeah, all of the different places that you could distribute media have different mediums. So you can have video, you can have long form video, you could have short form video, you could have, short little posts on X, formerly known as tweets. You could have long Substack articles. Like all of these different mediums
Artwork, music.
have, yes, they have their own strengths and weaknesses, messages that they are particularly well suited to carry. The mediums themselves impose constraints on the messages that work well in those mediums. Um, and so, audio in general is a medium, and we kind of use the term podcast for audio. Even I call them podcasts, even though we distribute our podcasts on YouTube and they have video attached to them. And we do that because YouTube is a way better podcast discovery engine than iTunes or any of the other RSS feeds. But ultimately, it's still a podcast and it's still a conversational podcast. And so I guess when I talk about podcasts, usually what I am talking about are these conversational, whether it's, Joe Rogan style or Tim Ferriss style or, any of the comedians that do great at this, or, all kinds of different styles of conversational podcasts where it's multiple speakers. This is not it's not a monologue. You can also do education. Like if you're going to do monologue, education is one type of content that you can make.
Like an
And you
audio
can
lecture
distribute
at that
these,
point.
yeah, on these audio only or even audio secondary platforms. And so that is something for people to think about and consider is, what is the message that you want to drive? And one of the lessons from Neil Postman's work is that if you want to do something that is entertaining, then you probably want to go towards the more like there's a gravitational pull in media for something that's entertaining to be a combination of visually stimulating and relatively short cuts. And then so like that's TikTok is kind of the ultimate form of like pure mindless entertainment and dopamine stimulation. So that's one thing. And so one of the things that Neil Postman's work says is that if you want to educate people, probably not going to be very effective at educating people on TikTok. It's not impossible, but it's hard and you're really swimming upstream because the people that are on TikTok are not there to learn anything. They're just there to be entertained. And so if you want to do something where you're educating someone or you're trying to expand understanding on a topic, then the primary means that you want to do that is probably going to be something that's longer form. And this is where, the audio format really lends itself much more to expanding someone's understanding than the video format, because the video format, if you're doing like produced video where you're doing a lot of visual storytelling rather than just putting the people that are talking on screen so that people can connect the faces and the voices with the visuals and the audio, all of that together. If you're not doing that as your video, but you're actually trying to tell a story using pictures and images, then the forcing function in visual storytelling is for a lot of stimulation, for those things to be shorter. And it gets to be much harder. It's also a very laborious process. Like visual storytelling is like That is a major art form. That is a major, I mean, people who do know how to tell stories visually, like that's an extremely valuable skill.
Even in audio. I mean, the ability to coherently tell a story. I've been reading more fiction
Yes.
recently. A buddy of mine recommended a series back in November or December. And for the past probably 15 years, I have exclusively read nonfiction. And just kind of in this deep funk where I would power through books that I wasn't really engaged in, but I almost felt guilty for reading anything for pleasure. So he recommended this book series. So I started reading it and was just almost instantly hooked. And it it was such a profound reminder that creativity is often sparked by experiencing other people's creativity and being able to read and visualize and feel like I'm immersed in what's going on in this fictional world, even though it's so far removed from our own reality, is kind of incredible, kind of mind blowing. And the ability to either visually communicate and create all of the animations and graphics or whatever it is that someone is creating for a video, or auditorily, like in Studio Gimlet's case or many of these audiobooks and things like that, is kind of mind blowing. Like you have to have a really deep understanding of human psychology and how we experience things. Because it's like while reading this book, you feel the highs and the lows. Like it is very emotionally compelling, and the ability to communicate that
Yeah. And
is incredible.
that is one of the opportunities that I think is especially available in that highly produced, like if you want to tell stories that take readers on an emotional journey, like that is something where getting better at the craft of production is going to make you more effective at creating the experience within the reader, listener, watcher, whatever that you are going for. That's going to be that compelling thing that they get the most value from and are the most engaged in. And that's different than trying to take someone on a process of intellectual discovery. Um,
I mean, it's storytelling, but in a different manner. Like we're telling a story
yeah.
here in this conversation. We're getting a deeper glimpse
Mhm.
into the story of how you started creating content and what makes you tick and what excites you and how you think about these mediums and distribution. I mean, these are all stories that we're telling, but in a very different format.
Yeah.
It's all story. Like every form of
Everything is
communication
story.
is story. What do you want for dinner is story,
Mhm.
whether we believe it or not.
Ooh. Everyone wants steak.
I'm thinking pasta right now. Pasta sounds good.
Yeah. It is a very, it is also very fluid because even it's easy to also think about the exceptions. And I think that is one of the magical things in content is finding those exceptions. So Veritasium is a highly successful YouTube channel, for example, that mixes like doing this educational process of intellectual discovery in a compelling story that is produced. And he's had to develop his ability to do that over time, and the better he's gotten at doing that, I think the more views that he gets as well. And so there are exceptions, and the exceptions can be powerful. Like we said earlier, a lot of times those exceptions are built on we're doing a unique combination of things here that other people have not combined before. And you can do that not only in your background, not only in, I think one of the things that your story about reading the fiction is an important component of is the material that you expose yourself to is also one of those things that can create differentiation in the content that you can create, because there's going to be a consensus among people who are creating content around a certain topic about, like, these are all the important things that you need to read and consume in order to create content. And if you're just reading all the same things as everyone
It
else,
becomes homogenous.
then you're going to make the same content as everyone else.
Yeah.
And so, reading something different or watching something different and figuring out how to connect the different thing that you're reading or watching into the conversation, if that different thing really is relevant and really does add value there, that's going to be a place that you can have a leg up. Um,
It's underrated,
especially,
and I think it's
yeah,
hard.
like
I think it's
because you can't use someone else to know what it is that you need to go read. You have to actually find something that is interesting, and you've got to go through the annoying process of searching for what
yes.
that thing is, which is the thing that no one wants to do, which is why doing it creates so much value. Like,
Well, and it sucks too because
yeah,
it's like you don't feel like it's connected. You don't feel like what you're consuming has any kind of input into what it is that you're creating, at least initially. Long term, you start to realize some of those things, and then it becomes
yep,
encouraging. But it's like this graph where you do the thing for a very long period of time. It's like the Jack Butcher "this is pointless" graph. You do this thing for a very long time before you ever see an uptick in output from the thing. But the best thing that we can do as people who are creating content and trying to get a fresh perspective on not just whatever it is that we're interested in, but the world in general, is just to consume a bunch of different things. It doesn't have to be an enormous amount of content. It just needs to be like within investing, there's the concept of uncorrelated assets, meaning when certain assets go up, then all of the assets that are correlated go up along with it. Negative correlation is where one asset goes up, the other asset essentially goes down. And it's almost like you have to find uncorrelated content in order to be able to get a fresh perspective on what it is that you are trying to, I guess, better understand or better communicate.
well, and it can sound intimidating, like, oh no, where am I going to find this content that is uncorrelated and useful and interesting? And the positive news is it's actually, there's a real simple rule. Just go find stuff that you're interested in, because
Yeah.
your likelihood to find what that valuable piece of information is and bring it back into the conversation that you're interested in having
Yeah.
is a function of how long you're willing to sift through that content. And how long you're willing to sift through that content is going to be driven by, is it interesting to you?
Yeah.
Because the guy who is reading all this stupid shit because he has to so that he can find the thing that he's looking for is going to burn out
Yep.
at, you know, 60, 50, 40, 20, 10% of the way through the search.
Yep.
Whereas the person who, like, I'm just looking at all this stuff because I'm enjoying myself. Is like, well, like, is this interesting, or is this part relevant to what I have to talk about? Maybe not, but man, I learned a lot. I love that. So
Yeah.
here, well, okay, move on. Let's do another one.
Yeah.
And so just like follow your interests and keep going, and eventually your brain will figure out what the connections were. They'll just appear. Like, that's kind of, the magic of our big squishy neural nets, is that they're able to create meaning even when there's not necessarily any meaning and connection to be had there. So
Yeah.
like, you're guaranteed to create those connections by diving deeply into something that you're interested about. Like, you can find how to put those two things together in a new and unique way.
Totally. And then it's like going back to the conversation about trying to increase quality of production and versus trying to keep your setup simple. Like, how do you balance that? Tell me about some of the workflows that you have. How do you balance trying to keep things as simple as possible, increasing the rate or flow of content while increasing production at the same time? What goes on behind the scenes that, yeah, what
Yeah,
goes
I
on
think
behind the scenes?
the thing that we've used recently that we really like that helps a lot in a lot of this is Descript. And so, I mean, that's what we're using to record this right now, obviously. It's a great video editing platform that's super
Incredible.
powered with all sorts of AI goodies and can help you with a lot of different things when it comes, especially when it comes to YouTube content, but even for other types of things. Like, going back to the microphone topic, like, so one of the things I didn't say is that after I had my my $20 MPOW headset, I went ahead and I updated to a blue Snowball, not the Blue Yeti that everyone else uses, but the Snowball, the older and cheaper, crappier version of the Yeti. And something like that, something as simple as that blue Snowball, which I think is 40 or $50, paired with Descript's studio sound, will probably get you a long way towards sounding really good. And every now and then you'll have some issues with studio sound and maybe you'll have to re-record something, but hey, man, it's an easy place to get started. And so studio sound in Descript is definitely huge win, huge unlock. But then they also have the ability to write descriptions for your YouTube content for you based on what's in the recording and then help you brainstorm titles, and then automatic multicam where it's cutting back and forth between the speakers in your podcast and all kinds of things like that. I do edit those automatic multicams usually. And it can be frustrating because they don't have great controls on that. Before we used Descript, I used DaVinci Resolve, and I had a plugin that I used for that automatic multicam feature that I liked actually better than I like Descript's automatic multicam. But it's not terrible, and I like their smart transitions. And so our workflow when we record a podcast is we typically record in StreamYard. That's up in the air right now. We'll see where that goes. Then we'll wait for those files to finish processing in StreamYard so that we can download them into Descript. And while we're waiting, we're thinking about what are the titles and thumbnails that we want to do. Is this a piece of content where we want to cut a clip out of it and pre-release the clip, and then do the full podcast release later? The higher our cadence of recording podcasts, the less we pre-release a clip. But I do like, and that's just because right now it's hard to manage doing too many things all at the same time. I do like the strategy, at least for YouTube, of cutting out a clip from the second half of the podcast that's very engaging, that has some valuable insights in it, and then releasing that first and then releasing the full podcast later, because you can really get a lot more mileage out of that same amount of content that you recorded to begin with. And it gives your audience two different formats to interact with that content in. And, if you ever watch the viewer retention graph on YouTube, you'll see that the second half of your podcast is probably not going to have that many people who stuck around and made it to that. And so you can actually share part of the conversation with your audience that they probably didn't see that. So it doesn't even end up being duplicate content for most people. And for someone who does watch the clip and then they go watch the podcast, if they want to fast forward through the part that they've already seen, like that's super easy, no brainer for them to do as well. So kind of a win-win-win all around. I like that strategy. And I think Chris Williamson is one who does a really good job of pre-promoting the podcast that he's going to be releasing. And I mean, this is obviously something that comes natural for him because he was a club promoter. That was what he did before he became a YouTuber. And so this kind of idea of building up some excitement around something that you're going to do comes very naturally to him. He's very good at that. We are terrible at that, but that strategy of, pre-releasing a clip and then doing the full podcast a little bit later is something that kind of feeds into that dynamic. We've got a lot of room left for improvement to work on that. And we're trying to figure out how to build in some of the systems to do some of that promotion work in a more automated and hands-off way, but still that meets the quality bar. From the standpoint of all the other logistics that go into it, like our studios are set up so we don't have to worry about that. Like you just come in, like the studio should be set up to where you just come in and you get into the recording software, whatever that's going to be, and you just hit record and you go. We work with, primarily cloud-based. That's one of the reasons why we like StreamYard, is the recordings are in the cloud. I don't have to manage a whole lot of storage of files here, there, and everywhere.
Descript is too.
All that stuff. Yeah, Descript is too. And there's lots of different ways. So I would say try and save yourself overhead and simplify as much as possible in as many places as possible. So we really have streamlined. We've tried all sorts of different things, over the past couple of years with our podcast. Like I said, I was doing the editing so Farzad and I would switch back and forth. Sometimes he would edit it. Sometimes I would edit it. He would edit it in Premiere Pro. I was editing in DaVinci Resolve because Premiere Pro sucks balls. And then, the things that he would like to do were kind of different than the things that I would like to do. And so there's a little bit of discontinuity between the two styles, but they were, similar. But either way, we spent a lot more time doing that than we do right now with Descript. Descript saves us time, and we've kind of settled to where Farzad's pretty good at titles, thumbnails, and then selecting the intro. So our workflow is, once that file gets uploaded into Descript, there's a little thing where you can say find highlights in Descript, and it'll go through the entire transcript of the file. It'll pick out the areas where it thinks, this is something that will be highly engaging for the audience. And you can tell it how many highlights you want it to find. You want it to find 5, 10, 15, 20, 30. And so, yeah, we typically do that and have it find somewhere between 20 and 30 highlights. And then he will go through, and whichever ones just hit him the most viscerally, he will cut that down and just keep about a minute's worth of those highlights. And those will be, stacked one on top of the others, just real fast cuts, very little transition or anything, just like pop, 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 pop. And that's what we do to front load the beginning of the episode. And then like 2 seconds of dead space, and then right into the conversation. And different conversations, flow differently. If we don't feel like the beginning of the conversation is going to retain well, usually what we will do is try to find where's the first part where this conversation is really going to grab an audience member. We will cut off everything that came before that and get right into something that's going to grab, because, on YouTube, retention in that first couple of minutes is the make or break of whether that content is going to survive the YouTube algorithm or not. So like if you're distributing your podcast on just an RSS feed or, iTunes, Spotify, whatever, the way that you're going to get your audience is by friends recommending your podcast to other friends. And so ratings and, person to person recommendations.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't matter. Like if the beginning of your thing is crazy high retention or not, like it's about downloads. It's not about how much of a podcast did someone consume. And so like podcasts that are distributed to those platforms obviously have way different pressures on them than podcasts that are distributed to YouTube. And so that does kind of create a little bit of a difference in the way that you package your content. And that's, something that's really, really important in content creation is your packaging. What is it that is going to cause someone in your audience to discover your content, engage your content, and then stick with it? So, that's the pressure that we feel on YouTube, and that's why we edit the intro the way that we do. As soon as he's picked out those things, kind of got his intro, thumbnail, all that sorted out, then I will kind of go through the entire podcast scene by scene and make sure that all the automatic multicam that Descripted makes sense, that the scene transitions are right, that it's not cutting to someone who's, not even looking at the camera or not speaking or whatever, because every now and then it does that, and that's frustrating. It's getting better. And I'm having to clean up less and less and less. And I do like the smart transitions that Descript applies between scenes. Those are awesome. And I created some custom templates in Descript for our podcast. So the way that it looks is going to be different than anyone else who's using any of the stock templates that come with Descript. I really like the way those turned out. That was, it took a little bit of overhead for me to figure out how to do all that. But that was one of those areas where I felt like, probably took me, a few hours to figure out how to do all that template work and make it work. And now I've played with using them ever since then. So it's one of those things that's kind of overhead of time, but it pays dividends that once it's made, if I like it and I get it sorted right, it improves the production quality for the podcast, for as long as we're using Descript to do that editing basically. And so I like to think about things that I can do from a production standpoint that kind of fit that bill, where what's something that I can spend a few hours on that is going to have a permanent impact on the production quality of the content moving forward. And if I do something like that every week, or maybe it's only just every month or whatever, then you're kind of consistently ratcheting up your quality over time.
It's kind of nice that you have two of you, essentially, because I guess what may have been missed in the story is that you began contributing in these Friday streams, and then at one point in time, you started showing up pretty much all the time. And so,
yeah, well, we had an actual conversation and decided, hey, we're going to do a podcast together that is the Farzad and Hans podcast, and
yeah,
so that is a different thing than those community forums that we were doing, and yeah, we made it permanent, and that is going to be one of the areas where maybe just to maybe circle back to the story, maybe that part of my journey into becoming a content creator is hard to replicate on purpose, like finding a creator that you can just work with, and then eventually tag along, contribute to and then get to share in the work that they've done in creating their platform in order to help launch yourself. Who knows if that can work for you? Maybe it can, maybe it can't. But I think from a first principles standpoint, the things that you can do is you can get around a community of people who are obsessed with the thing that you're obsessed with, and you're going to learn stuff from them. And you are also going to find out, hey, what is it that these people that I'm around, what is it that they value when I bring it? And so that is really helpful. Like we talked about earlier, following that obsession down the rabbit trails endlessly, like all of those things are replicatable. And I think being around that group of people where you kind of resonate with, it's very possible that you will find someone that you can collaborate with in some way, shape, or form. And one of the things that Mr. Beast talks about is that, if you want to do content, you definitely want to find other people that are obsessively doing content and try to get into their orbit. Even if they don't end up offering you an opportunity to kind of join them in what they're doing and move along, you will see up close and personal how it works, and you will understand what the gap is between what you're doing and what you will need to do is. And so all of that is helpful. And it is possible that you will find someone like, hey, like if you can find someone that makes content that you like, but you can also provide value to them in some way, there is always the opportunity for you to say, hey, I love work. Like I love what you do. Is there a way that we could do this together? And I think two people that I would highly recommend anyone to engage with their work if you want to become a content creator. Besides, we've already talked about Mr. Beast. If you can learn from Mr. Beast and what he's done, like he's obviously huge. But the Almanac of Naval Ravikant, I've already kind of mentioned him. That is a great source of inspiration and knowledge and wisdom around a lot of these concepts. And Jack Butcher, so visualize value, like you'll get a lot of these principles that will help to recognize where you can create value for someone. And that, so one of Jack Butcher's things is the permissionless apprentice. Like if you want to edit videos for someone, then download a piece of their content from the internet, edit it the way that you think it should be edited, and then send it to them and say, hey, I love what you do. I was inspired and I created this thing from it. I just wanted to send it to you and see what you think. If you like it, great, awesome. If not, no worries. In that type of taking in it. So first of all, that differentiates you from 99.9% of people, because most people don't take initiative. And most people always need permission. And so that's why he calls it the permissionless apprentice, is because you don't actually need permission to create value for someone. People are always looking for someone to just magically create value for them that they didn't ask for. And so the likelihood that you're going to be appreciated for just, here you go, here's some value, is super high. So this is one of the things that you can use to build relationships with like-minded people that have similar values that you have, that you respect and you admire. And this is, I think part of that story with Farzad is that I did bring something valuable to those community forum podcasts. And so maybe you don't have an opportunity to do a community forum podcast like that, but you are good at something and you have people that are making something that you appreciate. And if you can find what it is that you do that you're good at, that you can contribute to the thing that they're doing that you appreciate, then that is the space where, there is that high probability that you can find some sort of a mutually beneficial relationship that you can use to help get you to where you want to go. So yeah, that's, kind of a long roundabout answer just to encourage people that getting around people that are doing the thing that you want to do, a lot of the magic in getting where you want to go has to do with getting around the people that are going there or are there. And there's a whole number of things that you aren't going to be able to plan for that are naturally going to happen because you're in the environment where that stuff happens.
It's important not to gloss over the fact that you still did the work. You did the preparation before the community forums, and you did it with high intent. Like your intent was to show up, be prepared, and over time it evolved into something different, right? And so I think it's important not to gloss over that part. Like you still, even though there could have been an element of quote unquote luck
Mhm.
in your story, there was still a lot of work and preparation to put you in the right place to be able to benefit from serendipity.
Well,
And
and I think part of that is seizing opportunity, because I don't know that the first one that I came on, I necessarily had that intent.
sure,
But at some point I realized that this opportunity was there. It's like, regardless of whether or not Farzad, and there was actually a huge gap in between a time when he shut down the community forum podcasts and when he and I started our podcast together, where I didn't do anything with him. And in fact, he started another podcast with someone else. And then that ended up not working. And then after that ended up not working, then he invited me to come and do a podcast with him. But I was at that point already kind of off and running with my own thing and doing podcasts with other people that I had gotten myself into off of the community forum stuff. But to go back and just say, yeah, when I didn't realize at first when I went on the community forum podcast, oh, hey, like, I think I want to be a content creator. I think I want to do this. I want to make this into a career. Like, that's just something that I did when I was there. And I looked around, I realized, oh, wait a second. Like, I am on the internet and tens of thousands of people are hearing things that I have to say. And I like what I'm doing. Maybe there's a there. And then once I realized that there was a there, that's when I did say, okay, I want to take this seriously and I want to make the most of this opportunity. And yeah, it was through doing that and going and having conversations with other people that I was able to actually, I started my own YouTube channel off of the back of that eventually. That was still is, kind of a slow growing process. Most of the reach that I have is through the podcast that I co-host with Farzad. And my own channel is just kind of a side project that we take, I have a guy who does editing and he puts clips on my channel. And what I pay him to put those clips on my channel is probably, it's some months it's more, some months it's less than what the channel actually makes, but it's a little bit. And so it's kind of like this self-sustaining, relative, it's low, super low effort, super low input from me. And the money that it generates basically pays for it to keep going. And that's just growing an asset in my portfolio and a presence. But I was, I've been doing podcasts with 3 different major influencers within the space of Tesla retail investor content now for several years. I have, not just, and I was not just with Farzad. So like I have my own podcast with Farzad that I co-host, and I'm also doing regular appearances on 2 other shows. And so like I did take that seriously. I kind of worked myself into one of those on purpose, one of them by accident. And once I was in all of those locations, I took each one seriously as well and continued to try and make sure that what I'm bringing to each of those shows is solid.
yeah. So I guess now that the listeners probably have a better idea of your story and your foray into content, let's fast forward. What was the first dollar that you made on content? Do you remember what video it was or what situation? And what was that? What was that emotion of
Oh,
making, your first dollar with content?
that's, yeah, man, I don't honestly remember which video monetized. I should, because I remember, that is one of the Jack Butcher things, is like, just make $1 online. And once you do that, then it's off to the races.
Are you able to, in YouTube analytics, are you able to go back and see when you were monetized? Oh, you could probably look at an email that
Probably.
you received.
Yeah, I know. So I know the thing that got me over the edge, and it may not have been that video itself monetized, but I think that was the video that got me, the vast majority of my, 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 watch hours. It was a conversation with a guy named James Dalma, who is a computer scientist, has worked in, a number of big companies in Silicon Valley for a long time and is very deep in the weeds on machine learning. And he has been a guest on, there's a guy named Dave Lee, who is one of the big influencers in the Tesla retail community for a lot of years. And he was having these regular conversations with James Dalma. And at some point, Farzad had James Dalma on one of our community forum episodes. And so I kind of got introduced to James Dalma, and the machine learning part of Tesla is one of the things that I'm really interested in. And Dave had been unable to have a conversation with James in a while, and James doesn't have his own YouTube channel. He doesn't want to be a content creator, but the Tesla retail community loves James's insights, and they, search for his content. And I was able to convince him to come on my podcast before it was ever even monetized, to have a conversation about that. And that one video then was, even I think of all the things that he's done, it's probably one of the least viewed podcasts he's ever done, because my podcast was so small at the time. But for my content, it was, got way more views, way more watch time than anything else, and got me most of the way to that 4,000 watch hours and 1,000 subscribers just with the one video. But that was quite a few videos into content that I had created. That wasn't my first video on my own channel by a long shot. So I had done a whole bunch of other stuff prior to that. And then it was, not long after that I got monetized and was able to start making a little bit of money. But it was always a little bit of money. It was never much. And, still to this day, that channel is not doing that well as far as, numbers. But doing it gave me the experience. And, I was already, I was making my own long form podcast on these deep technical subjects and going down rabbit trails. And that that was kind of an avenue for me to really explore this space with people who were deep in the weeds. And it laid the foundation for me to then be able to go on these other people's podcasts and have interesting things to say. So, and then it also laid the foundation for being able to contribute to Farzad's podcast, because, I knew what I was doing. I came in being a person who knew how to record, edit, and create titles and thumbnails, even if they were terrible, and, all the things where I could actually share the responsibility of doing all the things that had to be done for our podcast as well.
I like that you share a lot of the responsibilities, because running a firm and creating content myself, plus trying to edit, and I'm no designer, my thumbnails are trash. It's just embracing the suck. I work with content creators, but I myself am not a great content creator. And so it's kind of this weird situation in which I find myself in. And I'm jealous of having someone who works in content that you can share the load. And to quote Lord of the Rings. But anyways, what does delegation look like? And how do you know what to delegate whenever it comes to content, what to pay for, and what to keep in-house? How do you make those decisions?
I think the biggest guiding light in all that is the same thing that we've been talking about. It's your interest. When you start out, you have to do everything. And there's going to be a lot of the things that you have to do in the everything that are things that you're not good at. And so you'll get better, or you'll figure out something. You'll get by without it, whatever it is. But
or just continues to suck no matter how hard you try, which is how I feel about thumbnails.
Well, so those are the things that, the thing that you hate, that sucks you up your energy and your time, that that you're not good at and you don't ever even care to be good at. Those are the top of the list of things to get off of your plate and give to someone else as fast as possible. You have to do them at some level for a while. But the first opportunity that you get to offload that work to someone else who's better at it, loves it more, all those things, do it. And then when you're doing all these new tasks, there are going to be some that you're I don't know anything about this, but I actually enjoy this part. So that's something that you can hang on. Don't put that at the top of your list to delegate, because your emotional energy as a content creator is one of the things that you have to conserve the most in order to be able to stick with it long enough to actually accomplish anything. And that's, big fundamental truth about creating content is that it is a grind game, that you have got to make a shit ton of content if you are going to make a dent in the world. And if you're going to make a shit ton of content, that means that you need to do everything that you can do to make sure that you can stick around long enough to make a shit ton of content. And all of the stuff that grinds you down to make content is the stuff that you need to think about. Okay, can I delegate this? Can I at least minimize it? Like, what's the bare minimum amount that I can do of this thing and still get by? Because that's what I need to do. So delete, like, first thing is there's all kinds of that stuff that you think you need to do that you don't actually need to do. And you need to challenge yourself. Do I actually need to do this or not? Because sometimes the answer is no. And if you don't have to do it, then man, you just saved yourself a whole lot of time, energy, and headache.
Or money if you're outsourcing.
Or money. Yeah. And then if you do have to do it, then what's the bare minimum that you have to do and you can get by? And, this is one of the places where following Elon helps, is because he has this whole system for dealing with this kind of stuff. So this is Elon's algorithm. First, you question every requirement. Do you actually have to do the thing that you think you have to do? Because a lot of times you don't. Number two is, if there's a part of the thing or a process that you can delete, then you get rid of it. If you delete something and you're like, oh crap, I broke my whole thing, now it doesn't work anymore, that's okay, add it back, but keep cutting until you find where it actually breaks, because that's where the limit is. And then by crossing the limit, breaking it, and then coming back, okay, I have taken out as much extra waste as possible. And without crossing the limit, you don't know if you found it. Maybe there's more that you could get rid of. And then after you've done those things, then you try to simplify what you're doing and make those tweaks to optimize it. Then you try and do it faster. And once you have done all of those, only then do you try to automate something. And so, especially when you want to delegate or outsource something, that's kind of usually your form of automating it. Like, I'm going to automate it by throwing it over the wall to somebody else. And I will say that automating something, you don't want to outsource something that shouldn't exist in the first place. If you can delete something before you outsource it to someone else, that's going to accelerate you getting to the place that you want to go. And you want to have that conversation with yourself and really figure out, is the thing that I want to outsource just because it's frustrating me and I hate it and I want to get it off my plate? Ask yourself if you can delete it before you hire somebody else to do it for you. And then if you're going to hire someone else to do it for you, you definitely want to make sure that you have thought about where its place in the overall process that you're engaged in is, and simplify it, because then that will help you to know exactly what it is that you expect from the person you're outsourcing it to, what the handoff to them looks like, what the handoff back to you looks like. So you need to kind of get your process for that sorted out before you outsource to someone else.
It's such a good framework. And I know that you and I discussed this a few days ago on a different call, but there's so much pressure when you're producing content of what you think that you need to have within a production or a piece of content or a video or a podcast. It could be a style of editing. It could be, oh, I'm going to spend an extra 15 minutes really honing in this audio here, or I really need some clean B-roll here, or I want to make some kind of fancy animation here. And in reality, for many people, especially people who are just getting started, you probably don't need that at all. And I think that it's also the same whenever it comes to investment into gear, investment into software. It's like, what is the cheapest software that you can operate on for as long as possible? Or what is the highest value investment that you can make into your business? And I think that looks differently for different content creators at different points of their career. Someone who's just starting out should probably invest in a microphone over any kind of like video camera or gear from that perspective. Maybe lighting. But then as you begin to scale, depending on what type of channel you are, if you're a podcast channel, then perhaps whenever you're starting to generate some serious income, it might be beneficial to create a studio. It might be beneficial to outsource some of the editing. It might be beneficial to make investments into higher dollar gear. And each of those investments needs to be calculated. Not just because you think that you want it, but what are the numbers? What are the trends? What are your analytics showing you? And what can you actually afford and what makes sense from a business perspective? And so maybe talk me through like the way that you are thinking about like as you've continued to scale and start to generate income for yourself through multiple avenues, multiple streams, multiple channels. Um, like tell me about some of the ways that you are thinking about investments today, um, at the stage that you are today versus how you began with a $20 mic.
Yeah, so I think at this point, we're really leaning into trying to create leverage for our time in the business. And so Farzad and I have brought in a virtual assistant to help with a lot of the administrative work, some of the scheduling, a lot of the work that goes into cutting down podcasts and multi-purposing it and doing the shorts and the clips and a lot of the stuff that takes a lot of time and it does add value, but it sure as heck slows us down from actually creating the core content that then you use to do all this multi-purposing with. So that's one
And
of
generate revenue.
that's one of the big areas. Now, of course, that's not cheap, so you need to be at a place where you're generating enough revenue to where you can afford to do that consistently. Um, but you should recognize that, if you can make twice as much of the original content that then gets multi-purposed instead of creating content and then doing all that work yourself, that you're dramatically increasing the amount that you can earn with the same amount of investment of your time. And, especially going back to what I was saying, like the thing that fuels me is having those conversations, exploring the topics. Like that gives me energy. And so not only am I spending less time, but the time that I'm spending is time that amps me up and keeps me going and makes me want to do more instead of when I create the content and then I have to do all that editing and clipping, and whether it's Opus clips or Descript or whatever, like trying to find clips and then trying to define shorts and then doing captions and blah
It's
blah blah,
draining.
like all that stuff I hate. And so if there are some people that they love that, like there's artistry in
Mhm.
editing, there's artistry in all this stuff. And so if
Absolutely.
you can find someone who, man, that gets them up out of bed in the morning, they're like, haha, I get to go conquer the world with, my creative repurposing of all this content. I get to put my artistic flair on things. Then two people can get not twice as much done, but probably 5 times as much done because you're tapping into those intrinsic sources of motivational energy that keeps you going. And so that's definitely a big one. And then the other thing is, I've just been thinking a lot about, the complex web of relationships between all these different distribution platforms, all of the different mediums of communicating these messages, the different types of messages that are being communicated. And as artificial intelligence, continues to be developed, I think a lot about ways that we can use not just other people to help us move content around, expand our distribution footprint with the same core ideas being adapted to the different formats, the different mediums, and the different locations. Um, but also to do that in a more automated way to where we can reduce the amount of time that people have to spend doing a lot of that work to move it from here, there to everywhere. Um, so yeah, I think that's the next phase of investments that I want to make of both time and energy, is figure out ways to actually build more, like increase the amount of automation that exists within, because it's I think for the foreseeable future, it's still going to be a hybrid process that involves both human taste, human input, selection, whatever, maybe refinement, fine tuning, some things around the edges, but giving those humans superpowers with tools that utilize AI to then be able to do significantly more of that, whether it's content repurposing, or content idea generation, like just all of the stuff that goes into all of the different aspects of creating content. So, helping with thumbnails, helping with titles, helping with maybe we should be taking out the core insights from a podcast and adapting them to a really good Substack article and being shot out to not only our audience and um, but our YouTube audience, but hopefully also growing an audience. in a different format. And yeah, so I think that's the big next step for tools. And those are the things that we're investing in, is tools, ways that we can get more out of what we're already doing, and we can do more of the thing that we love and then get more mileage out of what we've created.
What's the long-term plan as you are building a media business? Uh, Maybe you can speak about it, maybe you can't, but what do you, I guess, where does it go from here? There are obviously quite a few creators that started out on YouTube or creating podcasts, and now they've become media giants. What's your next step? You're not small, you're not huge. What's the natural next step for the evolution of your
Well,
channel, especially considering the niche that you're in as well?
there's a couple of, I guess, avenues or directions here I could take this. One of them is that, I don't want to be personally, and Farzad feels the same way. We don't want to necessarily be stuck only inside of the, Tesla retail investor niche community. And so there's a number of things that have been done, over the past couple of years to start broadening that out. And it's not that hard for us, because the things that Elon and Tesla and SpaceX and all these other companies that Elon is invested in, especially with X and XAI, they touch so many other things that it's easy for us to then move sideways into other niches, other verticals off of, the main branch of our expertise. And so one of the things is expanding the scope of the content that we create. For anyone who hasn't ever been to Farzad's channel, you'll also notice there's a variety of different types of content that get made there, that we make podcasts. But then there are also highly produced edits that are concentrations of information that's found kind of all over the internet, specifically for the YouTube format, that then can keep our audience up to date on important developments and things that are going on. Those are not things that Farzad and I create. Those are created by another guy. And he is a partner in the channel, and the stuff that he creates. We've thought through a very specific way to align the incentives of people that come to contribute to the channel, so they get to share in the upside of the value that they create. And so that's one of the things that, we have an aligned incentive structure that invites people who can create value to come do it here, and then to participate in the upside that they create. And then it's kind of a loose direction of the types of content that should be there. So it's, not anything can go on the channel, but there's definitely an opening for a lot more stuff to be made there than is currently. And so that's going to, continue to evolve and grow over time. We also have, different people that come on as well and contribute. And so like Larry Goldberg is someone who contributes to the channel regularly as well, on top of Farzad and myself and the edits that the editor makes. And he has his own style of what it is that he's making. So he's got a podcast series called The Maverick Mind, where he interviews these, renegade, crazy people that go out and get things done and build cool, awesome, amazing stuff. And he's got an incredible background himself, both as a founder, a CEO, an executive of very, very successful companies multiple times over, and then also is now an investor who he gets to do all sorts of, angel investing, seed round investing, private market investing, on top of a successful public market investment portfolio as well. So, he's a very accomplished, interesting person. And then he likes to go have conversations with other people who have done cool things, and they've got their own deal. And, Larry didn't want to necessarily have to deal with all of the overhead of running a YouTube channel and being a content creator the way that you have to do when you are on your own. And so that's part of the value proposition that works for both of us, is that we can help with a lot of the overhead of the stuff that makes that not the most fun thing to do. And he can create content that we're not going to create that content. We're not going to even be able to interview those guests. We're not going to have those relationships. And so kind of all of this stuff can come together in one place. And that, that also presents its challenges. We're trying to figure out how, how do you have kind of these different podcasts or shows or types of content, and how do you distribute those on the same channel or not on the same channel, and kind of all the interesting fun growing pains of that. And I'm sure this will continue to evolve. Like our core ethos is that we're always willing to try new things and learn. And our biggest guiding principle is that we just want to work with other people that have a high bar of integrity, that we feel like we can trust them and they can trust us, but that also have similar interests and kind of going in a similar direction overall. And so it's like, hey, we're going to just bring interesting, high integrity people together, and we're going to try stuff, and we're going to throw a bunch of stuff at the wall and see what sticks. And then we're going to do more of the stuff that sticks, and we're going to hopefully learn something important from the stuff that doesn't stick to make the stuff that does stick better. And I'm sure that's just going to continue to evolve over time. And like I said earlier, the biggest dynamic at play in making content is you got to make a lot of content. And so we are trying to architect all of this in a way that we're just going to keep at it, indefinitely, so that we can put in the reps to find the stuff that's going to not only stick, but win big.
I love it. Yeah, it's so interesting, because there's so many different directions that you could take like a media business like that, and obviously bringing in other people provides leverage that one single person would not be able to get on their own. Obviously, having those, what is that series called? Mastermind series? Is that what you said?
Maverick Mind.
Oh, Maverick Mind. Yeah. So the Maverick Mind series, obviously being hosted on a larger channel, provides for more leverage to be able to get more interesting people onto the channel. And then that type of content being on the channel helps to facilitate the growth of the channel, because it's content that you and Farzad would not originally make. And so
the question is, does the YouTube algorithm know how to distribute it to an audience? Because it is not necessarily the same audience. There's some overlap. Right. And so that is one of the challenges is, you hope you're not handicapping your algorithm for your main content, because this is slightly tangential to what you normally make, and a higher percentage of your normal audience are like, I'm not necessarily interested in that. And so it gets, downranked. So you're hoping that you're not shooting yourself in the foot on the next normal piece of content that you make by confusing the algorithm in the meantime.
So what's your thoughts on like splitting channels? I mean, it seems like at a certain point in time, it becomes
our thoughts are we have no idea what we're doing, and we're just going to keep trying things and trying to figure it out. So the only reason I say that, like, it's not a simple decision. It's like, yes, obviously the things that you said are true. Like Larry's awesome. His guests are awesome. The content itself is interesting. We like it. It's cool that it's on the channel too, but it doesn't get the same reach that normal content gets on the channel. And so that, feels not great for, kind of everyone involved. It's like, well, why did this, piece of content not necessarily do as well as some of these other pieces of content when, like the quality of the ideas seems like it's there. And a big part of that is just that YouTube knows how to distribute the one type of content better than it knows how to distribute the other type of content. And so we've got to figure that out. And, maybe that does mean we split it out, but then if you split it out, it's got to find its own audience all by itself. And that's going to be this whole long hill up
growth from
battle
all over again.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, and I have no idea how you'd roll content off of one channel onto a new channel to get that snowball rolling. Like we don't know. We're figuring all of that out. And maybe that makes sense. Maybe it doesn't. We don't, like I said, we're just going to keep trying things. And there is also that value, like, because it is interesting content that all of us enjoy. I think that does help to continue doing it even when we're not sure yet. Like there's a lot of uncertainty. We don't know, and we're just going to keep doing it. And for, as long as it's interesting enough for all of us to do, and hopefully it'll get us to a point where we figure out how to overcome some of those challenges and barriers. So, and, there's, you can think about the fact that the YouTube algorithm is not the only way to get someone to land on a single piece of content. And so maybe what it means that we need to do is try to figure out a different distribution strategy to increase the people that would find that content specifically, being linked to it from external places. Like, there's things that can be done here. These are challenges that are solvable. And we just, need to keep playing until we find what works.
Amazing. Well, I want to thank you for coming on. I think that we'll end this one here. We could probably speak for another few hours on a number of different
Oh
topics that
yeah.
we discussed
It's not
today.
like content is complicated or messy or
Yeah.
confusing to make at all. And therefore,
Never.
there's any
Difficult
interesting
businesses to operate.
things. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a number of different things. I'm excited about the growth of the channel of the media business. I'm excited to see what you guys do next. And perhaps in a 6 months or a year, we'll have to do this again and recap everything that's occurred since. And you'll have to let me know some of your findings and how you've overcome some of these challenges. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate the insight and input that you've contributed. And we'll speak again soon.